So, hello and welcome to Lorraine and Colin. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. We're really honoured to have you both on. At the outset, I'd just also like to say thank you for the brilliant Lydiard course that I went on, which was over 3 years ago now, but I certainly really enjoyed it and got a lot from it, and have been sort of highly recommending it to anybody that will listen since, really. So, thanks a lot for that. So,
Thank
Lorraine,
you.
you're over in sunny Colorado. How's life over there at the moment, given the situation with the coronavirus? Have you got a relative
Oh,
freedom to be out and about?
well, I did a very quick run. I was in Portugal and I was off to England to teach another course with Colin in Clun in Shrewsbury. And this virus was just sort of happening. And I went, ooh, I think maybe I should go to the airport and see if I can get home. And I got one of the last flights out and got back to home, and so we've had to postpone that course. But anyway, since I've been back, I've been quite enjoying just a quieter, more introspective time, and I think it's a really nice reset for a lot of people. Boulder is beautiful, so we can still go out and exercise and do our runs, and we got blue skies and sunny days and just everything that's wonderful about living here. So it's
Yeah,
very nice. Thank you.
yeah. I think a few people we've spoken to over the last month have said similar things. That you've got to try and draw the positives out of a difficult situation, and that sort of idea of having a bit of a reset and slowing life down for a while is has come up a few times as how people are trying to approach it. That's the only way you can approach it, really, I guess.
Yes, well, I think that is really important. And I do think that we can get, we've got all this technology, we've got all these amazing things that bring just tons and tons of information to us. But I think we need to reset so we're not overloaded.
Mm-hmm.
Because people have adrenal exhaustion, they push themselves. I mean, that's the thing with athletes, they'll push themselves way too hard, they'll push themselves to the brink of injury and illness, etc. We have kids who are, and adults, but kids who are addicted to their computers and cell phones, etc. And humanity has to do a big reset, because this is the first generation of children that has a life expectancy less than that of their parents. And once we get on that trajectory where it goes, well, the human race is like, okay, if we're going downhill, then we're not really as advanced as we think we are. In some ways, we've gone forward in some ways and back in another. And I think we get a chance to reset and figure out a new way of doing things. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Lorraine, your achievements in the world of running, both as a runner yourself, but also, I think an influencer and a pioneer in some ways. We could probably spend an hour just listing some of those achievements, but I'd actually like to start with quite a simple question, really, as to what drew you to running as a sport in the first place. What do you love about it?
Oh, I was from a big family. I was the third one of 6 kids, and my brothers were very active, and we did a lot of sport. So I had some really harrowing experiences of, I had an infection when I was young, and I ended up in hospital quite a few times, and there was, I couldn't, or I wasn't allowed to do the things that my brothers did, but the one thing that I excelled in was running. And so I took to it when I was 13, and I wasn't a great runner. I wasn't a particularly fast runner as far as sprinting goes. So I didn't have that outright fast twitch. But the once I ran my first it was a 440 yards. That tells you how old I am. and I won the 440 yards. I beat the girls who could beat me in the sprints, and I went,
Mm-hmm.
that's it, you know, I'd found my place, and I won my race, and I just wanted to keep on going, and I got addicted to the winning of races. And so by the time I was 16, I was competing for my country, and uh, so on the world stage at a fairly young age, and that just continued. And I don't know really how it happened. It was just really a case of probably the old follow your bliss type of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And it just, I'm just, you know, absolutely just amazed and grateful for the fantastic life I've had
yeah,
through
yeah.
running.
I think I read in your book, I recall that you used to run a lot in your early days barefoot, and you also sort of, you know, used to run out on the trails with your father at the time. Is that right? I just wondered, you know, whether that was part of the package, that, you know, the sort of freedom to get out with nothing on your feet around the area where you live.
Yeah, well, the barefoot was on the grass.
Mm-hmm.
On the trails that we ran on, we had forests around our house, pine forests that just went for miles and miles and miles. So I did wear shoes, and my first shoes were like little canvas sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. And it was a wonderful time because I got to know my dad. So I was a teenage girl, and you know, I was keen on this running, and he had a bit of a beer gut, and was in his 40s, and decided that he would run with me so he would get fit, and he figured he was the canary in the coal mine. So you know, I had more resilience, so, you know, if we were in trouble, he would feel it first. So, and we just had a wonderful time. We just went on bigger and bigger loops, and my dad had an awful sense of direction, which I think really contributed to my endurance ability, because we
That why
got
the
lost
mileage
so
is so
many
high.
times, you know. Yeah, we'd be miles away from somewhere, and, you know, eventually it'd be so remote, and we'd find some farmhouse and, you know, go in and beg a ride home, or see if we could use their phone, and our poor old mother would have to try and figure out where we were and come and pick us up. So that happened quite a few times.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. And
Mm.
I mentioned your book there. It's the title of it's On the Wings of Mercury. I believe it's quite an intriguing title. I was wondering if you could tell us where that comes from.
Oh yes, because I really enjoy mythology. Mercury is the god with the winged feet, and he is the messenger between heaven and earth. And so the way I see it is that he's like a spiritual connection, or the way that our higher self speaks to us, and it
Mm-hmm.
does when we're running. You know, we have, I think most runners, and we don't talk about this very much, but when we get out there, we get into a space where it's just a wonderful communion with your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Socrates said, know thyself. And I think that running in any endurance sport is that time when you're out there and you're just, you know, you're moving along, and the brain starts going into this incredible creative state. And you get to know yourself. You get to
Mm-hmm.
figure out how you tick.
Yeah,
And it's a really good way of getting away from the noise, and just going on those long solitary runs. And I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. Do you see it almost as moving meditation?
Yes, absolutely. So that's when the messenger comes, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
I think when we're out running like that, we're invoking Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, he would speak to me. He'd give me these really like way out sort of ideas and things. And I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it. Yeah.
yeah. And is that something that's been with you, that sort of, you know, love of mythology, you know, right from a very young age when you were first a runner, or is it something that came later as you started to progress?
Uh, yes, I think I always had that. I think probably that my own company, the company of my own mind, it became to the forefront when I was put into hospital away from my family and just, like sitting
Mhm.
on a hospital bed. It was like, oh man, it was so, so lonely. But, what do you do? And as a kid, you are very resourceful. So,
Mhm.
I would just retreat into my own imagination and my fantasy world.
Mhm.
And the running tied in and sort of took me to the next level with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the one aspect that interests me about your own running is that you mentioned, your first sort of win was 440 yards, so quarter of a mile. But you seem to, as you progress, to sort of excel at the middle distance at sort of 800-meter races, and then later moved on to the marathon. And in terms of races, there didn't seem to be an awful lot in between in terms of distances. You tend to go from middle distance to marathon, and I just wondered whether that was, why that was, whether that was driven by your ability at the distances or just circumstances at the time.
Yes, it was mostly a matter of opportunity because you have to know that when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, when I was doing my running, that well, at 1972 Olympics, the longest event for women in the Olympics was the 1500 meters.
Mm-hmm.
So there were attitudes back then about, that this was a man's dominion and women really didn't have any business doing long distance events. We were considered the weaker sex then, which I think people are realizing, well, that's not quite the truth. I mean, we all have our own abilities, but women have certainly, come into their own
Mm-hmm.
during that period. And, I think probably when we had the advent of the pill in the 60s and women had control over their own fertility, it was a great time. That heralded the woman's liberation. And we saw just women coming into business and government and
Mm-hmm.
all fields, including sport. And so when I came along, I was just at the beginning of that wave of this woman coming into endurance sports, and was part of the first marathon that they had in the streets of London, which was sponsored by Avon, and it was a showcase event for the to get the women's marathon included in the Olympic Games in 1984
Yeah, that
in
was
Los
Catherine.
Angeles.
Was that Catherine Schweitzer, the lady who was the first lady to run Boston, was a sort of a big
Yes,
part of that, wasn't she?
yes. Well, Catherine was the first woman to run in the Boston Marathon, or the first woman to officially enter. She was not the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. The others just sort of jumped in and just sort of hid,
Mm-hmm.
and they were without a number, but she wore a number. But
Yeah.
anyway, Catherine got a lot of recognition for that Boston Marathon run where Jock Semple tried to tear her bib off her during the race, and she went on to dedicate her life to creating opportunity for women. And so she was the organizer of that race in London and invited me over. And, look, I couldn't have cared two hoots about marathons at that time. I'd run a marathon just as a lark. And
Mm-hmm.
but because I was Lydiard trained, I ran that marathon as my long run.
Okay.
Um, and ended up running 236, I think.
Mm-hmm.
237, something like that. But, because it was just a new thing for women, it was actually a world ranked time. And Catherine went and gathered all these women from around the world, and I was one of them. So we, uh, and this was for this race in London.
Mm-hmm.
So she had all the best marathoners from around the world. And I went, oh man, I get to go to London. I get a free trip, get to stay in a hotel, and all I have to do is do a long run. So that was my attitude pretty much.
Yeah.
And when I got there, it was, very, very exciting because we realized we were part of something really special. And this was the first time the streets of London had ever been closed for a sporting event.
Yeah. I think a
And
lot of
that
people
was,
in the UK think think of the first London Marathon as the following year in 1981, and and hadn't realised, a lot of people I'd spoken to hadn't realised that the streets of London were closed the year before for that race.
yes. So, it was setting new territory because.
Hmm.
And and I ended up winning that race, which was
Yeah,
great.
excellent.
And
Yeah.
so then, slowly this idea of running the marathon crept up on me, and I'm glad that I had such, like my initial marathons were just like long training runs,
Hmm.
because it made it a very nice sort of entree, and I never had a fear of the distance. It was,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
pretty
I think
easy
that's
for me. Yeah.
something that I'm sort of interested in, really, is what you said there, is how, sort of being from a middle distance background, the approach to training set you up even right through to the marathon distance. If, was the training relatively similar?
It's absolutely the same, because the basis of Lydiard training is what he called marathon conditioning, but really it is just getting your aerobic base and being able to efficiently be able to run for long distance.
Hmm.
And that is the basis for all the. Snell did the 23-mile Bahili Waiatarua run with his teammates, and he
Hmm.
was an 800-meter runner.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the basis of, it's not about speed, it's being able to sustain your top speed
Hmm.
for the distance of your race. So it's
Yeah,
really, so you find that it's all about managing energy as well. So you really want to be able to just run efficiently as fast as you can, and then what you've got left you use for your finishing sprint, or for tactically being able to
yeah, yeah.
go into an anaerobic metabolism. But when you're running even say in 800 meters, your majority of your energy is derived from aerobic metabolism.
Hmm. Yeah,
And by the
yeah,
time you get to a marathon, you're 99.9 aerobic metabolism. So it makes sense that you want to spend time getting that system as efficiently developed as you can.
yeah, yeah. Excellent. All right, I'd like to
Yeah.
probably come back in a few minutes talking a bit more depth about the Lydiard principles and stuff. But just to, just finish off in terms of your own running career, obviously that winning the international women's marathon in London, was that sort of something that paved the way to the marathon being included in the following Olympics
Yes.
in
Yes, it was
84?
instrumental. So there was a criteria that had to be fulfilled for inclusion as an Olympic event. And there had to be like so many participants from so many continents, from so many countries, etc.
Hmm.
And that was what Catherine Switzer was catering to when she put on that first marathon in London. And so the marathon, and there were other people lobbying for it. And, it was a huge leap, because it didn't have the 5,000, the 10,000, they didn't have complete parity in events. They went, so they added the marathon for 1984. They also added the 3,000 meters. And as you remember, that 3,000 was the one where, oh
Mary
gosh,
Decker and Zola Budd, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
where they had their little foot tussle. Yes. So, it was, yeah, exciting time. So I got to run in that first women's marathon in
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles. And that was really, really exciting. And that began my Olympic career. And I went to every marathon until the turn of the century. And so 4 Olympic Games, 4 Olympic marathons. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just wonderful. Just incredible
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah. And in Barcelona in '92, you were a medalist, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And so that was always my big goal, to stand on the podium,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, that was visualizations and all the rest, you know. I have the talking to Mercury all the time, you know. I wanted the gold, but, you know, I got the bronze, and I'm really happy for that.
Yeah, that must have been incredible. So, yeah. So
Oh, yeah, amazing feeling.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm just going to bring Colin in for a second, because Colin, you've been kind enough to join us tonight as well. I was interested, for people that don't know you, you know, what your running background and history is in a nutshell. I think you've been brushing shoulders with Olympians for quite a few years yourself, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I'm somewhat in the shadow of Lorraine, but I was a relatively decent runner, and I was in the same training group as Steve Ovett down in Brighton, and then I trained with Peter Elliott up in Leeds. So yeah, I was an 800 and 1500 meter runner. Lorraine, I was never drawn to the marathon. But Andy, I have done an ultra.
Yeah, well, you do a bit of fell running and stuff as well yourself, don't you?
Yeah, some of that. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, and is that the type of running you enjoy nowadays? The off-road stuff yourself as a runner?
Yeah, the last 3 weeks, I've just been walking. I've just been walking on our fantastic hills down in South Shropshire, and going out for a couple of hours and then coming back. And I've been amazed. I've actually got fitter doing that. Yeah. Matt, you ought to do that.
Yeah. No, it's surprising how hiking can actually make a big difference, can't it? So yeah. I
was reading, Lorraine, that some of the Japanese top marathoners, they go out and they do hiking for 6 or 7 hours with backpacks on, preliminary to their aerobic base training. Had you heard of that?
You're asking me?
Yeah. Have you heard?
Yeah, they did. Oh, absolutely. They do it in Boulder. They come up in teams, and we would often see them, you know, way up in the mountains. Mm-hmm. Some little girl with a backpack just trudging up the hills. And you know, they know how to take something good and make it better, you know. And they've done that with the Lydiard training. So in year one of the 4-year Olympic cycle, they would spend the first year just building the strength and the muscular strength to be able to take high mileages, and then they would be able to run in their weekly mileage. Oh, some of them run anything from 100 to 200 miles a week. You know, but they can do it without breaking down, because the musculoskeletal system is, you know, it's much slower developing. So they build a better infrastructure first.
Yeah. I was chatting to somebody the other day, and I was saying there's almost a logic in, you know, a lot of people, you know, want to get from camps to 5K within a few weeks nowadays. There's almost a logic to say, well, you ought to train to hike for 50K and then start running, and 5K running will come a lot easier because of the robustness that you've built up in your body and that aerobic development, right?
Yeah, yes. Walk before you can run.
Yeah. It's an old saying, but there's logic behind it, isn't there?
Yeah, we do a lot of training of people that do walk to run. My wife takes groups, and I'm always amazed by how quickly they get to 5K. Absolutely unbelievable. They can go from nothing to running 5K in 10 weeks. And Lorraine and I share the same views about the human body, about it, how unbelievable machine it is. To be able to do that, I think that's staggering.
But it is.
Right now, there are thousands of people doing that, and they're on week 6 probably, because I think this is week 7 of lockdown. In another 4 weeks, there'll be a lot more people being able to run 5K non-stop. If they do it correctly, of course. But that's another story.
Yeah, it's another positive, isn't it, of the current situation? You know, there's more people taking up exercise. Somebody was asking the other day, is it compulsory? There seems to be that many more people out there, but it's a positive thing in lots of ways, isn't it? But I think what you said there probably leads us nicely on to talking a bit more depth about Lydiard. Before we talk about the principles, I'll just sort of go back to your Olympic medal, Lorraine, and I think I heard you say when I met you before that I think Arthur Lydiard himself had spoken to you not long before, and you drew some strength from what he said. I think you referred to him as, you know, as the greatest coach. So I was just interested to get your view on, you know, what was great about him in terms of, you know, the man and the legacy, before we start to talk a bit more about the actual principles of the way he trained.
Well, as most people probably know, Arthur was from New Zealand, which is my home country. And so when I was growing up, the heroes of our time were the likes of, you know, Peter Snell and Murray Halberg and John Davies, various Arthur Lydiard athletes who he had taken this group of young men who lived just in about a mile radius of his house. And these were the guys who were not picked for the rugby team. You know, they weren't the big, burly, robust sort. And he just said, if you train with me, you know, I'll teach you to be champions. And he did. And so when they went to the Olympics, and Peter Snell won the gold medal in the 1960 Olympics in the 800 meters, and then an hour later Murray Halberg won the gold medal in the 5,000 meters. It made everybody sit up and take notice, because here was this tiny little country with this very small gene pool that were, you know, taking the medals away from the big giants with their sophisticated programs, and especially the Eastern Bloc, who had, you know, would put kids into training camps from the age of, you know, 3 or something, and put them on, now we know, fairly sophisticated drug regimes, etc., and just everything to win golds. And you've got this one little coach on it, you know, with the neighborhood boys who's taking them to the cleaners, you know. So that really put him in the spotlight, but it was a huge sense of national pride for us. And I was just a little kid when that happened, and you know, it was just amazing, because we identify very closely with our sports people in New Zealand, and so that sowed a little seed. And then when I was 13, and I ran my first 440 yards and won that, and then went on to 880 yards and cross country, etc. And it was considered that I had some talent, that the people in my club decided I needed to have a really good coach, and they got me together with John Davies, who was a bronze medalist in the 1500 meters from the 1964 Olympics. And John became my first coach and put me on a Lydiard program. And back those days, we didn't have any internet or anything, so we just did it. We met a few times, and then he wrote me letters and sent me my program. And occasionally, when he wasn't sure what to do, say with the interval training, or how much volume to give me, and he didn't want to hurt me in any way, that he would call up Arthur, and they would have discussions about how to coach a girl. So I was probably an experiment for them as well. And I was very fortunate to be put on that program, and just gently build my mileage.
I guess the obvious question there is, did they train you any differently because you were a girl?
Yes, they watered it down somewhat. Yeah, but the system was still intact. So I went through, you know, the build up, you know, the hill training, the some intervals. The intervals were fairly light, and you know, and into the integration and the and I can remember running in the Commonwealth Games in 1974 in Christchurch, and I'd gone through that program. And when just the day before, you know, I ran down to the track just to do a little bit, and I absolutely had this feeling of having wings on my feet. There's the old Mercury thing again. Yeah. You know, it's just like, man, just such an incredible feeling. And that was what the program was able to do. It was able to bring you to the peak on the day that counted.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the legacy of Arthur, I think, for athletes, just to be able to time and modulate the training in such a way that you can bring the very best out of yourself when you need to.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, we all know what it's like when we get to the race and we go, dang, I missed that one, you know, and then a week later you're absolutely flying, or your timing's just off, you know, or you have a workout and you go, gee, I wish the race was today because I'm really on.
Yeah,
and that can be very elusive, but it doesn't have to be, because you can engineer it with your training.
Sure. And do you think the beauty of it is in, you know, the sequence of doing things, or, you know, emphasizing, you mentioned before, really emphasizing, you know, the aerobic conditioning, which would enable you to do anything from 800 meters to the marathon? What's the real beauty of it, do you think?
I think that your overall fitness is based on your ability to mobilize and process oxygen. And that is the aerobic capacity. And and it is that ability, if that is really high, that gives you that feeling of tirelessness, you know, like of ease, of just being able to just go out and you know, you're chatting away and you hardly know that you've even, you know, covered much distance. And so that was what Arthur, I think, offered up to us. And I think the timing it's all important, it's all crucial, and as Colin will tell you, the timing issues are what we address over and over again in our courses, so that it's all very well having all the pieces to the puzzle, but you've got to put them together in the right way to make a coherent picture. And many people have the pieces and they just do the wrong thing at the wrong time, and they completely derail what they were going after. Would you like to add to that, Colin, about the whole timing issue, the rhythm of the week? And
well, it's just when you get fit, you just know how fit you are, and you just see these. You've got to be aerobically fit to do anything. And what I see people training anaerobically, which is a very limited system, which doesn't produce much energy and which can be trained in a very short time. Instead of going out and running chatty and running long and just enjoying themselves. And the thing is, you'll get much, much better results by slowing down and Lorraine says having relaxed fun rather than having hard work. And I've just seen it. I mean, Steve down in Brighton used to spend hours and hours running around the streets, running chatty. I used to run with a friend of Lorraine's up in Leeds, Veronique Moreau. And she used to chat away, you know, 10 miles in 60 minutes in a marathon training, and it was chatty. So some people say that Lydiard is long, slow distance. Well, no, because Steve could run chatty at 5.5 minute miling. Veronique easy at 6. What could you chat at, Lorraine?
Yeah, I could chat at 6.
I could do that.
You know.
Do you think the problem is, Colin, to Lorraine, that the problem is people confuse speed and intensity? Is the fact, you know, somebody that is massively aerobically fit, they're moving at quite a lick, which for somebody that isn't, you know, that's super fast. Yeah.
But I've seen, you know, people say, oh, they put Steve's training up, and then they say, you know, he ran mile after mile at 5.5 minute miling or whatever they decide it was. And then you should do the same. Well, no, you shouldn't do the same.
No.
You're not an incredibly gifted, once in a lifetime athlete, probably.
Yeah.
So you should be running your own chatty pace, not the Olympic champion chatty pace. So my chatty pace now is about 10 minute miling, and I have a whale of a time. And, you know, I'm 60, so what the heck?
Yeah. So
you know, I think, one of the big misconceptions is that we have to train hard to race hard, and I've had athletes tell that to me quite a few times. You know, so they think that for us to make progress in anything that we have to sort of go eyeballs out on something, or there has to be this amount of sort of grunt, you know, and we've got to have our knitted brows and we've got to, you know, really sweat and carry on. And that's simply not true. And it's one of the fastest ways that athletes who are generally a sort of A-type personality, they get themselves into trouble very quick. And so, you know, the way that we teach it is that it is progressive, it's sequential and it's progressive, so that each phase of training sets you up for the next phase of training. And if you miss one of the parts, then you're going to not be getting what you want to get out of it in the subsequent parts, because you haven't built the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is really important. That's your aerobic base. And one of the big reasons why it's so important is because it is also your recovery system. And the whole idea of training is that we are engineering specific stresses to get specific results. And the results are gained during the recovery period, when the body reconstitutes itself, regenerates itself, and builds itself up, and will adapt specifically to the way in which you stressed it. And so that is the beauty of the training.
Yeah. Colin, you coach, I believe, quite a range of runners, both in terms of sort of age groups, but also the type of events people do. So it isn't, you know, purely either track or road. You sort of work with people that run ultra distances and fell runs and stuff. You know, are they still applicable for those people in your view? And, you know, to what extent would you vary them?
No. I obviously, if you're an 800-meter runner, the end of your program is slightly different, and you'll be running at a faster speed, and you'll be getting your anaerobic system as high as you possibly can. But the thing is, if you want to run well in any event, you have to max out all of your energy system. So it's just a case of the order that you do it in, and you do the aerobic first because that's the most important, and you spend most time on the aerobic system because that's the one. And Lorraine and I I'm absolutely certain that we've had the same feeling. When you've done your aerobic training, and you do your fast strides in it and your fartlek and things when you're base training, but once you've finished that and you've done your hill session, you run fast. You know, I was an 800-meter runner. I'd be doing 600-meter reps in 82 seconds. But I'm doing it because I had this massive aerobic base. I see athletes that don't have the aerobic base, and it's so hard for them. And they don't ever get that wonderful feeling of just being able to run effortlessly and fast. Because they haven't got the blood capillaries and the enzymes and the mitochondria. They haven't got the bigger heart and the greater blood volume, because they haven't trained that system.
Yeah. Do you find, though, there's a lot of people coming into the sport now, you know, probably a little bit later in life, you know, they're not coming in as juniors, you know, they're doing it well into their adulthood, you know, after quite a lot of inactivity, that their busy lives with work and etc. There's so many constraints that doesn't give them the time to train a lot. You know, what advice would you give to these people as to how to?
It's the best ever time, isn't it, for a Lydiard coach? Because one, there's no races to do, so they don't get in the way of your build-up, and secondly, you can spend all this time on the base, so it's fantastic. So but I'm writing, just doing my own book, and I've been researching it, and there's a lot of work out there about high intensity interval training, and it's really interesting because that's people want to do that, and you read, and I've read a large number of papers, and it's all we tested people over 6 weeks. And they did aerobics. One group, not a very big sample size, one group did aerobic training over 6 weeks. And then we did high intensity interval training over 6 weeks. And what we found is high intensity interval training was better. Well, of course it was, because they're training hard for 6 weeks. But you actually did it over 6 months, and you gave the aerobic lot 12 weeks of aerobic fitness, and then you put them through some hills, and then you put them onto some anaerobic work to top it off, you tapered them down, they would massively outperform the high intensity guys. Again, it's the time constraint in the research.
Yeah, yeah.
But when even then, what they say in the paper is, they say high intensity interval training is the same as aerobic training over those 6 weeks. They very rarely say it's better, but then they come back and they say, but it takes much less time, so you're more efficient. Doing it.
Yeah. Does that lie? Is that where the root of the problem lies, though? Is the 21st century? Everybody wants a hack. Everybody wants instant results.
No, I don't think so. I think is people will they look at the internet, and there's a lot out there, and you have to, any coach, and you look at everything, and it's what works for you. Yeah. And I know this works. But if you think about it, if you did high intensity training for 6 weeks, you'd see pretty impressive results. And in those 6 weeks, and that hooks them in. God, look how fit I've got in those 6 weeks. But in 6 weeks, they've maxed out that anaerobic energy system. And post 6 weeks, chances are they're not going to improve very much at all. Their legs might get a bit stronger, but that's that system maxed out.
Yeah.
But they're hooked by that original progress. But having said that, I'm going to have a month off walking the hills. Think of the progress I'm going to make in 6 weeks of aerobic running, 8 hours of aerobic running a week. I'm going to make a lot more progress than if I did 4 lots of 30 seconds on an exercise bike 3 times a week.
Yeah.
It's much more fun, isn't it? Is it much more fun going out for a gentle, chatty run than sitting on an exercise bike, rattling your legs around for a minute at a time?
I think so, but you're talking to the converted. Obviously, I've been on the course a long while ago. So. Matt, you were
cycling on an exercise bike.
I'm fascinated. Can I come in and ask Lorraine a question? Because one of the things that really impresses me, Lorraine, about your approach is how sociologically informed it is. And I think that one of the things that you started us off with was this kind of idea that we have this fetish for technology in modern culture. And I know that one of the concepts that you, I, and Colin have been thinking through is your own concept of the body whisper or the body whisperer. Can you say a little bit more about that kind of kinesthetic, proprioceptive feel to training, which goes against the Strava culture, it goes against the Garmin culture? It's far more intuitive.
I just have to get the dictionary out for that. But
okay. Oh, Matt and I, we're probably kindred souls in that. There you go. So look, when Lydiard was training his guys, they had, and when I was running, we didn't have any, technology to where we didn't know how far we went. You could even measure it in your car and it probably wouldn't be accurate, right? Yeah. But so it was purely intuitive and developing that sense. And now we have learned, and I think to project ourselves into the outside world and then keep looking at this outside world to validate us and to tell us what to do, instead of going like, we're creating it, it's coming from inside us. So let's get our focus back on the inside and develop and get to know ourselves and our own minds and what's going on within ourselves. Because I tell you, when you get into a race, nobody can tell you anything. You don't have any external feedback. You're completely reliant upon yourself. And ultimately in life, that's the way it is. We need to become self-reliant. And I think getting out there and running is one way of developing our own internal compass, our own internal technologies, which are all there. There is nothing outside of ourselves that does not also have an equivalent within ourselves. And within ourselves has unlimited potential. Outside is fixed. And it's just like looking at a screen or at a movie or something like that. It's somebody else's idea about reality that you are taking into your mind and accepting as your own. So I think it's time for human beings to take control of the narrative again and start to realize that we are all energy ultimately. I mean, you know, you can look at any sort of quantum physics, which is very popular these days, and it's just like, you know, we're really composed of just, you know, quantum particles whirring around in great vast spaces. That's what we are. And at a certain level, you couldn't tell the difference between, you know, me and you and you know, the table and all the rest. We're all part of just different sort of gestalts of energy and interpretations of it. And so let's get with the program. Let's not have, you know, say artificial intelligence dictate to us who we are. Let's get back in the driver's seat of our own lives. I think that getting out and running and moving under our own power is one way that we get there. So, you know, with Arthur's guys, now, when he set a workout for them, it was on feel. It was like they had to figure it out. There was nothing that they couldn't even tell what their heart rate was. So he had a system where he said, okay, you do this workout at quarter effort, you do this workout at half effort, you do this one at 3/4 effort. Now those were all degrees of aerobic paces, with 3/4 effort being somewhat at your aerobic threshold. 7/8 effort would be a time trial type, and 7/8 was as hard as you ever went in training. 100% you save for the race. And it's good because a lot of people do try to do 100% in training and they think more is better and all the rest. So this idea, I think, that we need to do more, more is better, harder is better, is part of this belief system that has been pushed on us, and we can call it the Protestant work ethic or the Catholic work ethic or the Jewish work ethic or whatever. But what it is a work ethic, I think, that gets people to just work harder and produce more. And it is an idea that treats us as a machine or as a commodity. We are not. We are so much more than that. And and we have our power, I think, is in our creative potential and our creative imagination. And when you get out there and you're running along, you start to invoke that part of itself, and you realize, man, there's and for a lot of people today, they never use it. They just follow along with somebody else's rules, and they beat to somebody else's drum. And often I think we have systems now that they don't really have our best interests at heart. They're just sort of milking our energy. And I think it's really important we get back in the driver's seat. And one of the best ways to do is just, look, get a friend and just start moving. Don't sit still. Just get the energy moving, and it changes everything up. And you'll start to get to realize how hard is too hard. We learn by mistakes, you know. All of us have overtrained and got ourselves into trouble, blowing the race, right? And so, and we learn to be able to read that, and then you'll find that you can do it to a really high degree. You can have your own internal systems so that they're giving you very accurate feedback about your environment and how to navigate it. And this enables us to then be able to put out or project into the future that which we desire, or that which will be fulfilling to us, and to learn how to make it happen for us. So in my case, it was like I wanted to stand on that Olympic podium. And man, I worked for years and years and years and years, you know, to try to make that happen. And, you know, you'd go to the Olympics and you'd blow it and you go, dang, you know, can I come back for another 4 years? Well, you know, I did. And that was so valuable for me to learn about how I can project my energy into my future to create the world that is fulfilling for me. And we all have that ability. And I just, you know, so I love to get out there and teach this stuff. And it's just like, here is a system that you can put your energy into, and it's going to come back to you in a positive way if you follow these guidelines.
Yeah. It's very interesting. The guests we had on earlier in the week are a couple, and he coaches sort of natural movement and stuff. And with his own running, he got quite disillusioned with it a few years ago. You know, very much the type of person, I guess, and he wouldn't mind me saying, that Colin was describing earlier on, you know, the people that were smashing themselves with higher intensity running, chasing personal best times and whatever. And over the last few years, he's taken a very more sort of natural approach to it, doesn't worry about time, you know, has got to the point where he can run comfortable every day, you know, really thinks about eating well, whatever. And his capability as a runner has come on no end, you know, because he's built it again from the down, from the bottom up, and has taken a much more, you know, mindfulness approach to it all. And I see a lot of people like that in our own community, because I sort of mainly deal with people that want to get out running on the trails and in the mountains. Is quite a few arrive, probably getting quite disillusioned with their running, because their times are not getting any quicker, you know, and they're jealous of their friends that can do a half marathon quicker than them or whatever. So they're quite frustrated, and they come on the trails and, you know, and say, oh, this is going to be really hard, I'm going to have to walk the hills. I say, that's a good thing, you know, is just enjoy. We'll measure the run in terms of photos per mile, not minutes per mile. And they come and enjoy that chatty, as Colin says, chatty run in a nice environment. And they enjoy it, so they do more of it. And before they know it, they were doing much better than when they were throwing themselves at the wall, smashing themselves to pieces previously. And it's almost, you know, something I've been pondering in recent weeks with a lot of solitary running while we've been, you know, sort of with the social distance in the UK, is running ultimately going to come round in a full circle as people start to discover that tuning in with their natural ability and what intensity they're at, and they'll get back to the point where I guess Arthur and co were back in the 50s and 60s, where you didn't need all the technology, you were running for the joy of it, and actually you're training like champions.
I think Andy, you can use the technology, but people use it the wrong way. Coming back to Matt's question, in that what they do is they let the technology dictate to them, rather than let the technology just be something that they might choose to use. So, for instance, people, I don't know, you should ask them, but the people that I see when they first come to me, I'll say to them, oh, what pace are you running at? And they invariably will look at their watch and tell me exactly what the minute per miles they do, etc., and how many kilometers they've done in the week. And then they compare their minutes per mile to their friends. And you have to get away from that. You have to say, no, look, just go out and enjoy yourself. It is what it is. But then when they start to improve, hang on a minute, 6 weeks down the line, oh, you know, you measured that run, it was 10 minutes a mile. What are you now? Oh, I'm 9:15 now. Oh, okay, so this is working then. And we're actually beginning to use the technology to help us. But when they use it and they're looking at their heart rates and they don't know what pace they're at, so they don't know when they're running chatty and when they're running at their threshold pace, then they're never going to improve, because they don't know what they're doing. They're not aware of what pace they're running, and they're certainly not aware of what they need to do in order to improve. It's an education thing. You have to get them to be aware of what pace they're running at, and then why they're running at that pace. And as you say, the guy that slows down and starts enjoying it, well, funnily enough, they do more. And as my mantra, it's the volume you do, not the speed you go, that makes you a faster runner.
And I think so. People find it a little bit counterintuitive, don't they? That you've not got to be killing yourself all the time. So
Andy, if you think you've got to run fast, you should train fast. That's logical to me, until you know the physiology behind it. And if you run fast and you get acidosis and you're lactated up, you're not going to do that much. But if you go out and you run chatty and you gradually build up the time of aerobic training, all the physiology physiological adaptations happen to your body. And Lorraine makes the comment about how you actually have a different body. You know, in 4 months' time, every blood cell in your body's different.
Yeah. I think something I hear a lot is people saying, well, if you only ever run slow, you'll lose the ability to run fast. And I don't totally agree with that. And I would think you don't as well. And I think you use an approach called sort of chatty, sparkly runners. Does that somewhere address that issue?
Yeah, of course it is. Because first of all, I don't use the S word, because some people's slow running is, as we say, Lorraine and I could run easy chatty at 6 minute miling. Other people, their chatty running might be 13 minutes a mile. But yeah, and the Lydiard base training also has it as well, is that you do fartlek once a week and you do short efforts. And I both tutor the England Athletics and the elliptic sprints, the 10 seconds of what I call free energy in your muscles, which is already there, ready to use. You won't get out of breath. Give it 2.5 minutes to recover, then you go again. So that's my sparkly bits, and people love running fast. Well, yes, you do run fast in the aerobic phase, but you only do it in 10-second bursts, or you might do. I do it in some of my athletes. I'm sure Lorraine did more. You might do 30 seconds at your 1500 meter pace, but you're not going aerobic. You're just really enjoying.
Yeah.
I mean, the really nice thing now is that I do 35-second efforts at my 1500 meter pace, and it feels like the 1500 meter pace I was doing in 1984. But actually,
it doesn't look like it.
It still feels the same. So I love it. And people love running fast. And so we do run fast in the base phase. It's another one of those myths. So first of all, once you're aerobically fit, you'll run fast.
Yeah.
Your average minutes per mile will go up, but you also run fast at least once a week, possibly twice a week if you do your fartlek or your strides twice a week. And that's true speed training, isn't it?
Yeah.
Running as fast as you can over 10 seconds. Running hard over 3 minutes when your legs are heavy and you're losing your coordination. That's not speed training. That's not fast.
But that, in your terms, those sort of alactic sprints, the short, sharp sprints, they're addressing almost the musculoskeletal system.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, to keep that into, and avoiding going deep into the anaerobic zone.
Yeah, I coach a lot of people who are new into running, and they're doing 5Ks and they want to get under 30 minutes, and they don't do any faster running. And then we do 10-second sprints. We don't call them a sprint, but fast and relaxed running. And they love it. They absolutely love it. And give them enough recovery. They won't get tired. They can do 6 lots of 10 seconds. They won't get tired. They love doing it. They energize their system. They become much more chatty in the session. People come into the session and they're knackered from a day of work. They've done 6 lots of 60 meters. They've really energized their system. They're buzzing when they finish. That's how it works.
Yeah.
But if they just did a hard anaerobic session, they would be wiped out. And they'd go home tired and weary, and enough the next day they wouldn't want to go running, because people do listen at the end of the day, they do listen to their bodies. They should listen to their bodies more.
Yeah. There was a term that you used when I was on the course, Lorraine, that's really stuck with me, and I've probably ripped off and used it myself quite a lot since, was you can only progress as fast as your slowest part.
Oh, yes.
It's a very simple statement, but a lot of wisdom behind it, really. You've got to really listen to, everything. And if it's something in your lower body, a nagging Achilles or whatever, is don't run fast until you fix that.
Yeah, you can't leave a part of yourself behind.
Yeah,
or you're going to really, because that part will stop you.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah.
So I can't remember who said it, but the bozo bus can't leave until all the bozos are on board. You'll probably stick in your mind too.
Brilliant. Now, this has been really insightful, guys. Matt, have you got any other burning questions that you'd like to ask
yourself, Colin, and Lorraine, for your wonderful insight, for helping my own coaching and coach education? It's been a real experience for me, and pleasure to work with Lorraine and Colin and yourself on this, Andy.
Yeah, cool.
Andy, can we just do a plug for the
Yeah,
next?
no, I was going to ask you to do a plug actually. Yeah, beat me to it.
Yeah, so we did have a Lydiard course in March that got postponed as Lorraine had to peg it back to Boulder. That's on the 12th. That's rearranged on the 12th and 13th, and we've a few places left on that. That's back in South Shropshire.
Yeah.
In
September, that is, yeah.
September 12th and 13th of September. We'll put the flyers out tomorrow after this is meeting, and Lorraine is hoping to put an online course on 6 o'clock till 9. We're thinking Monday to Thursday, 18th to the 21st of May. That will be purely online, and that's got limitations. But we're hoping, because of the circumstances that we find it, people are in, that actually they want to do that. Mm-hmm. You know, as you spoke right at the beginning, at the beginning of this hour, that you get just as much from talking to the people around you on the course. Yeah. So I don't want to lose the face-to-face course, and Lorraine's coming over for a couple of weeks in September. If there's enough demand, we might be able to put a course on as well the weekend before the 5th and 6th. We have to see.
Yeah. Well, can I just say a little bit about the course? Yeah. That it is called the Lydiard Levels 1 and 2 Coaches Certification Course. And I know it sounds quite academic, but it is suitable for anybody who just has a basic physiology sort of understanding. Most runners do. So, you know, we talk about anaerobic and aerobic, etc., but they're all self-explanatory. But what we do is take you through the Lydiard principles and the Lydiard phases, and by the end of the course, you will have all the pieces, all the workouts, and understand where they fit in the program so that you can get the maximum gain, physiological gain for yourself by going through the program. So, and it's suitable, Lydiard training is suitable for beginners and as well as for people who would be at, say, international athletes. Yeah. It can just be adjusted accordingly. And so it is.
There's no prerequisites for the course. You don't have to have any other previous coaching qualifications or anything, Lorraine?
No, I've had people who've come in cold who don't even know anything much about running, but decided they wanted to be a coach, and you know, and they've done really well with it. And we do give a lot of personal attention, especially to get people certified. So we do have an exam, but the exam itself is a really good education, and you know, so we bring people up to speed so they can pass on it. Yeah. And you know, I remember breathing, and you know, yeah.
I remember breathing a big sigh of relief when I got my marks back from yourself after my course.
Yeah.
I got good marks. It was
People in the UK are quite frightened of failing and failing exams, and what we do is we talk to them. So it's not an exam as you'd expect an academic exam like maths students might take. It's have a look at the questions. If any of you don't answer, if you want to FaceTime me and we go through it so that I can check your understanding and you can learn a bit more, happy days, then submit it. Yeah. That's how it works. It's not an exam in the.
One final question for Colin. Can you spell proprioception, please?
Yeah.
And Lorraine, I would like to spell kinesthetic.
Matthew.
I have a sociology degree. It's hanging. The certificate's hanging on my laboratory wall outside. Guys, it's been brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I've just got one final question to both of you. Really, was what, from all your years' experience as runners and coaches, in Lorraine's case, sort of being president of the Lydiard Foundation, what's the best piece of advice you would give to a typical beginner runner nowadays, which, you know, the typical beginner runner tends to be somebody that's well into adulthood. What's the best piece of advice you would give?
I would say, first of all, stick with it for, if you can stick with it for 3 months, you're going to have established a routine. So a lot of people go at it way too hard to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest starting really easy and breaking it off in very small increments, and you know, just adding a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest thing is that people just bite off too big a chunk to begin with, and that is and then they don't enjoy it and they let it go.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is I say that the hardest part of going for a run is turning the doorknob. And one way to get around that is to get yourself a running buddy about the
Mm-hmm.
same ability, and somebody who you enjoy the conversation with, because you're going to be, and someone who you trust, because you will end up probably telling them all your innermost secrets. But if you have somebody waiting on the street corner down the road for you, you're going to get out and do it than if you don't.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly somebody that'll ask you lots of questions, because that will make you stay chatty, won't it?
Yes, yes. So, and having somebody of the same ability as you is very important, because if somebody is much faster than another person, then, and you go for a run together, somebody's going to be doing good training and somebody's going to do bad training.
Yeah.
And probably it's the slower person who's going to be doing the bad training.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Behind that, and you can run chatty together if you're within 4 minutes of your 5K time, and you're much better off being the faster of the two.
Yeah.
And coming back to your question, what my one bit of advice would be, well, obviously join Chatty Sparkly Runners on Facebook, Andy. But apart from that is learn how to run chatty, because most people run too fast, and I spend most of my time telling people to slow down and have more rest.
Mm-hmm.
So learn to run chatty, which is talking comfortably in full sentences, which is Lydiard base aerobic training.
Yeah.
And everything that Lorraine said, gradually build it up, and you will be amazed how your body will adapt. You will be absolutely amazed by what you can do.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah. So run chatty, but suitably socially distanced for the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, don't run with your cell phone to your ear. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a million to both of you. That's been absolutely wonderful, and good luck with the upcoming courses, and hope to speak to you again soon. Thanks a lot, and thanks for you for joining as well, Matt.
Appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
You just need to go and put 50p in your meter. It's got a bit dark.
The light shines up.
When you entered the stadium in Barcelona, wasn't it, Lorraine?
Yeah. Yes, yes. Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much, all of you. It was just a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And very nice to see you again, Andrew, and to meet you, Matt, and Colin.
Guys.
Yeah,
Right,
we'll be
brilliant.
talking soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.